It was on the 5th evening of September, as the sun set in the blood-red haze behind the distant hills, that I arrived at Caro House. The journey had been long, and my spirits low, but I was drawn to the house by a letter, one I received from only days prior. The missive, written by an unsteady hand, was an old acquaintance, Lawrence Addington, who spoke of dreadful happenings that could only be confided to me in person. As I stood before the iron gate, its hinges rusted with age. The house loomed like a hulking beast against the sky. Its windows were dark, its shutters closed like the heavy lids of the dead. The air was thick with the scent of decay, as though the earth itself rotted beneath my feet. Yet something deeper stirred within me, an inexplicable compulsion to proceed. Upon entering the estate, the great oaken door groaned as it opened, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Beyond, Lawrence was nowhere to be seen, yet his voice, faint and trembling, called to me from unseen depth within the house.
"Edgar, it is you, isn't it?"
The voice echoed off the walls, hollow and disjointed.
"Lawrence?"
I replied, stepping inside, the door closing behind me with a shuddering thud.
"I've come as you requested. Where are you?" "Upstairs, in the study, but beware, there is something in the walls."
My blood ran cold. The house, with its strange geometry and suffocating atmosphere, seemed to breathe. The very air around me felt oppressive, heavy with secrets too long kept. Still, I pressed onward, ascending the creaking staircase that spiraled up into the shadows. As I reached the study, I found Lawrence hunched by the hearth, his form barely illuminated by the flickering light of the dying fire. His once robust figure had withered, his skin pale and translucent, stretched over the bones of a man who had witnessed horrors unspeakable. His eyes, those wide, fevered eyes, were fixed not upon me, but on the walls that enclosed us.
"Edgar,"
he whispered, his voice barely more than a rasp.
"It began 3 weeks ago. The voices. At first, they were faint, whispers I could dismiss, but now they are constant. They speak to me, Edgar. They know things, secrets I've never told a soul."
I glanced around the room, and though it was silent, an unsettling sensation crawled up my spine.
"What do they say?"
Lawrence's hands trembled as he reached out, grasping my wrist with a strength that belied his frailty.
"They know my sins, Edgar. They speak of my past as though they were there, hidden in the walls, watching, and when I try to sleep, they grow louder, accusing me, condemning me."
His words clawed at my sanity, but I held firm.
"You've been alone too long, Lawrence. The mind plays tricks." "No."
He stood abruptly, his voice rising in terror.
"It's not my mind, it's the house. It's alive. It feeds on our guilt, our shame. And when it is fed enough, it devours us whole."
Before I could respond, the room itself seemed to shudder. The walls groaned as though under immense strain, and for a brief moment, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, a breathless voice, too low to make out, but undeniable. Lawrence turned to the wall, his face a mask of fear.
"There. Do you hear it?"
He pressed his ear to the stone, his body rigid with tension. I listened closely, my breath held, and then... Oh, God, the whisper came again, clearer that time, a soft, malevolent murmur, speaking not words, but sounds that twisted and coiled like serpents in the dark recesses of my mind.
"We know you."
"Lawrence," I whispered, backing away.
"We must leave this place now."
But it was too late. The walls, those cursed walls, began to move. Not in the way a house settles, but with a grotesque undulation, as though something beneath the surface writhed and pulsed like a living creature. The stones bulged outward, and from within, the whispers grew louder. more distinct. "You cannot escape." Lawrence screamed, his hands clutching his head as he collapsed to the floor. His voice rose in a mad crescendo, mixing with the choruses of voices that now filled the room, spilling from every crack and crevice. I fled. I could not stay. The house had taken him, as it would surely take me if I remained. As I ran down the stairs, the walls seemed to lean in, constricting around me, as though they sought to trap me within from suffocating embrace. The whispers followed, taunting and mocking. By some miracle, I reached the front door and threw it open, gasping as the cool night air hit my face. I did not stop until I was far beyond the iron gate, my heart pounding in my chest. And even then, in the silence of the night, I could still hear them. The voices of Caro House, whispering, their terrible truths echoing in my mind. Lawrence Addington was never seen again. To this day, the house stands as it always has, silent and brooding, its secrets locked within. But I know the truth. It's not merely a house, it's a prison of the soul and a tomb for the guilty, and I fear it will call to me one day, when my own sins can no longer be hidden. And when that day comes, I will be unable to resist its whispering walls. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, or if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. My name is Stone Rock, and today we're covering Edgar Allan Poe. He is by far my favorite author. Telltale Heart is my favorite story from Edgar Allan Poe. I was explaining to the most recent girlfriend one night. She had never read Poe or anything like that, so I pulled out. I've got this big book that's full of Poe stories, and I pulled it out and I read the Telltale Heart to her. Now, I don't read to anybody. I read to my daughter when she was like young. But now that she can read herself, like I don't read to her too often anymore. But I pulled this book out and I read it to this girl because I wanted her to experience Poe. Like, that's how much I love his stories. And I did. I read it to her, and then we sat there and we talked about it for a couple hours. And it was cool. That was a cool experience, like getting to share that with somebody that I cared about. So yeah, if you like what we do here on this channel, why not like, comment, subscribe? Let me know down below what you think of Edgar Allan Poe. What's your favorite Poe story? Hit that notification bell, that way you're notified whenever a new video goes up. And let's get into it. Edgar Allan Poe, an author whose name has become synonymous with mystery, madness, and death. His life was a series of highs and lows, filled with heartbreak, personal demons, and literary triumphs, yet his death remains one of the most puzzling mysteries of all time. Today, we journey through the dark corridors of Poe's life, from his tragic beginnings to the theories that surrounded his untimely end. Edgar Allan Poe was born January 19, 1809, in Boston, Massachusetts, to actors David and Eliza Poe. But Poe's life took a tragic turn from the beginning. His father abandoned his family when Edgar was just a year old, and soon after, his mother died of tuberculosis. At the age of 3, Edgar was orphaned. Young Edgar was taken in by John and Frances Allan, a wealthy couple in Richmond, Virginia. Though Frances was kind and affectionate, John was distant, often cold, and their relationship would be marked by tension and conflict throughout Edgar's life. As a child, Poe showed an early interest in the arts and literature, but his foster father discouraged these pursuits. John Allan wanted Edgar to follow a more practical path, pushing him towards business. This clash would fuel Edgar's lifelong struggle for independence and approval. In 1826, at the age of 17, Poe entered the University of Virginia. It was here that his talents as a writer began to flourish, but it was also here that financial struggles worsened. Poe lacked the funds to pay for the tuition and living expenses, as John Allan refused to provide adequate support. In desperation, Poe turned to gambling to make ends meet, but his debts quickly spiraled out of control. By the end of his first year, Poe owed more than $2,000, a staggering amount at that time. Poe's attempt to reconcile with his foster father were unsuccessful, and in 1827, Poe left the University of Virginia in disgrace. With nowhere else to turn, Poe enlisted in the U.S. Army under the false name Edgar A. Perry. Despite his disdain for the military, Poe excelled during his first 2 years of service. However, his true passion remained in writing. During this time, he published his first volume of poetry, Tamerlane and other poems, though it gained little attention. His desire for recognition as a writer grew stronger. Poe sought a discharge from the military and a chance to attend West Point. Though John Allen briefly agreed to help, their relationship soon soured once more. Poe was intentionally court-martialed and dismissed from West Point after only 8 months. Now, without a stable career, Poe turned to writing full-time. He moved to Baltimore, where he lived with his aunt, Mary Clem, and her daughter, Virginia. It was during this time that Poe began to gain recognition as a short story writer, particularly with Miss Found in a Bottle, which won a literary prize. It wasn't just literary success that Poe found in Baltimore. In 1836, at the age of 27, he married his cousin Virginia Clem, who was just 13 at the time. Their marriage was often been a subject of controversy. Those who knew the couple described their relationship as loving and devoted. Now, here's my thing with that. I try not to look at it through the modern lens. Like, he was 27, she was 13, right? Like, that's today. You're not going to do that unless you're a PDF file. Back in those days, it was far more common for that kind of thing to happen. It was a thing for a long time all over the world. So, like, I try not to look at it from today's point of view. Now, I will say, marrying the whole cousin thing, that even not looking at it through today's point of view, that kind of throws me off. But again, that was something that happened all over the world. You know, we look at the Habsburgs from Spain. They did it all over the place. Elizabeth Bathory was also actually married to a Habsburg, if I'm remembering correctly. So, like, they were everywhere. That was a big family, and they all married each other and interbred. So, like, well, trying not to look at it through today's lens and being like, you know, maybe they just, like, really loved each other. You know, maybe that's just how it was. You know, they just had that kind of love for each other. So I'm not gonna rag on the guy for that. You know, he was a tortured individual, and you know, he found his person, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, everybody that was around them said that they were truly devoted to each other and they truly loved each other. So, you know, who knows? You know, who am I to say anything bad about that? You know, I'm just not gonna look at it through today's lenses. Unfortunately, happiness was fleeting for Poe. In 1842, Virginia began to show symptoms of tuberculosis, the same disease that had claimed his mother's life. Her illness would cast a shadow over the rest of Poe's life. It was during these difficult years that Poe produced some of the most famous works, including Fall of the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart, and The Mask of Red Death. His stories, filled with dark themes of death, madness, and guilt, resonated with readers and cemented his reputation as the master of Gothic horror. But it was the publication of The Raven in 1845 that catapulted Poe to literary stardom. The poem, with its haunting refrain of "Nevermore," captured the public's imagination and became an instant success. Poe was now one of the most famous writers in America, but fame did not bring him financial stability. Despite his newfound fame, Poe continued to struggle with poverty, often working as an editor for various literary magazines to make ends meet. His sharp criticism of other writers earned him enemies in the literary world, but his reputation as a brilliant and innovative writer continued to grow. Virginia's death in 1847 devastated Poe. Her illness had dragged on for years, and her eventual death shattered his fragile stability he had managed to maintain. Poe's drinking, which had been a problem in the past, worsened dramatically, and his health began to decline. Poe's final years were marked by loneliness, illness, and deepening dependence on alcohol. He moved frequently, attempting to find solace in new relationships, but he was never able to fully recover from the loss of Virginia. His life seemed to mirror the dark, tragic figures of his stories. And then, in October 1849, Poe's life came to an abrupt and mysterious end. He was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore, wearing clothes that did not belong to him and muttering incoherently. Poe was taken to Washington College Hospital, where he slipped in and out of consciousness. Over the next few days, unable to explain what had happened to him. On October 7th, 1849, Edgar Allan Poe died. His final words, according to witnesses, were, "Lord help my poor soul." The exact cause of Poe's death had been the subject of debate ever since. At the time, it was reported that he had died from congestion of the brain, a term often used as a euphemism for alcohol-related causes. Some believed that Poe succumbed to alcohol poisoning, as he had a history of heavy drinking. However, others suggested that Poe may have been a victim of cooping, or a form of voter fraud where individuals are drugged or beaten and forced to vote multiple times. Other theories include rabies, heart disease, diabetes, or even a brain tumor. Some have speculated that Poe may have been suffering from a severe mental breakdown, while others point to his fragile health in the years leading up to his death. The cooping thing, along with alcohol poisoning, kind of paints a picture. He was wearing clothes that didn't belong to him. He was wandering around the streets. And at that time of year, early voting would have been going on. So it's not hard to imagine that he could have been, kidnapped and then forced to drink alcohol and then forced to go in and vote. And then he would come out and they would force more alcohol into him, change his clothes, send him back in to vote again. He would come out, they'd force more alcohol into him, change his clothes, send him back in. So to me, that paints a pretty vivid picture of what could have actually happened to him. I'm not saying that that's what happened to him. I'm just saying that that's the theory that draws my attention most. It's really unfortunate. Just his whole life is super unfortunate, but I don't know about rabies. Heart disease, maybe. Brain tumor, definitely could have happened. Who knows? We wouldn't have known about the heart disease or the brain tumor in those days, Though his death remains a mystery, Poe's literary legacy is undeniable. His tales of the horror, madness, and the macabre have inspired generations of writers, filmmakers, and artists. Today, Edgar Allan Poe is remembered one of the most influential figures in American literature, and his stories continue to haunt readers from around the world. Poe's life may have been filled with sorrow and tragedy, but through his work, he achieved a kind of immortality. The master of the macabre lives on in every shadow and in every whispered nevermore. It's also to be said that there is a movie about him. It's loosely about him. He's like a detective or something in the movie. The football team, the Baltimore Ravens, named after Edgar Allan Poe. The Baltimore Ravens were once the Cleveland Browns. The team was sold to Baltimore and renamed the Baltimore Ravens. And then the Cleveland Browns came back as a whole new team later on. Pretty interesting, but the Baltimore Ravens, clearly Edgar Allan Poe. The movie, John Cusack played Edgar Allan Poe. Honestly, I can't see any other person playing him. Just to be completely honest, John Cusack actually really kind of looked the part for that movie as well. So it was a decent movie for what it was. I can't remember too much about it other than the fact that he was like trying to solve a crime. And it was during his later years of life. So I think he actually dies at the end of the movie. But I've always loved Edgar Allan Poe ever since I was a kid. The Raven, I used to read The Raven all the time when I was a kid. And when I discovered the Telltale Heart that one became my favorite. Just something about he would open the door to the old man's room and then shine the lantern in on the guy's like weird eye, just enough to where like when he opened the door to kill the guy, he wouldn't wake up. And then he like buried him under the floor, but he could constantly hear the heart. Like just something about that. I don't know what it is exactly, but something about that stuck with me from a child all the way to today. And even now, I told the story at the beginning where I read that story to a girlfriend at the time, and I needed to share that because she didn't know anything about Poe. She had never heard of him, and I needed to share that with her. I just wanted to, I had to have that experience with her where I shared one of my favorite stories with her from Edgar Allan Poe. I don't think she has read Poe or even heard the name Poe since we split up in October, but that was still something that I had to do because I absolutely love Poe. Anyways, I'm going to stop rambling on. I hope you guys enjoyed this look into Edgar Allan Poe's life. Now, there's a lot more detail. There's big time gaps. You know, I kind of jumped from the big points in his life and left out a lot of the smaller stuff. But you can always go back and do your own research on Poe. Go out, you know, read your favorite Poe story. Put your title of your favorite Poe story down below. And when I have time, I will go back and check them all out because I've got that big book of Edgar Allan Poe's works. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here and work on a couple more videos before I start cleaning out this house. So I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you next time.